omniscient, as the Bible says He is, then God has seen every one of their sins, no matter how well they have tried to hide it. Some of y'all know Mike Vespucci. Mike Vespucci is in the Army, and he is stationed overseas in a little place called Bahrain. And I remember one time he called me from that little island. And he's telling me how hot it was and how miserable it was. And he said, and Keith, there's crime everywhere here. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, because the people of Bahrain believe that their island is too small for God to see. So this is where they come to do their shady deals. This is where they come to do their activities that they wouldn't want God to see. Bahrain it's too small for God to see. So this is the place where they go to behave sinfully. Because here God cannot see. But we know that that's just wishful thinking, right? That's not true at all. There is no place so small that God cannot see. There is no recess, even in the depths of our own minds, that is so remote that God is not there. God knows everything. And sadly for many, this knowledge of God is not tolerable. They can't accept it. And one of the people who could not tolerate this particular virtue of God, this particular attribute of God, was a man by the name of Jean-Paul Sartre. How many of you ever heard that name? Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was a philosopher and an atheist. And Sartre's main objection to God and the existence of God was that it was intolerable for him to consider any being to constantly be looking at him. Now I'm bringing his words down to a very simple level, but that was the ultimate problem that Sartre had. He said that if man were a constant object of another's gaze, that would be a life lived intolerably. And this was the outline he gave. He said, if I were standing in a hallway, looking through a keyhole, watching someone in a room, I am the subject, they are the object. He said, that's completely fine. He said, but if I were looking through that keyhole and I heard footsteps in the hall behind me, immediately I become the object. And I get filled with guilt. This is his illustration. He said, I become filled with guilt and shame. He said, and that's intolerable. It's intolerable to be the object of someone else's gaze. And if God exists, you are the constant object of someone else's gaze. So to Sartre, the concept of God was intolerable. And do you know what led to Sartre's position? Sartre was a little boy. I guess we all were at one time. Well, not the women, but Sartre was a young man, and he had caught his family rug on fire. And he caught the rug on fire, and when he did this, he put it out very quickly, but it had left a burned rug, so he began to quickly try to clean and hide his mess. And his thinking was, as long as no one sees it, it'll be okay. But then it came into his mind, in the midst of his attempting to cover up his sin, he realized that one person had already saw it. One person had already been witness to his crime. He said, this is what he said. He said, he felt the gaze of God inside his head and on his hands, and it sent him into a rage. And as a young man, he began to curse the name of God, because he could not stand to be the object of God's gaze. And he believed, later he said he believed God stopped looking at him because he ceased to believe. So now he could live in peace. Well, of course, that's not true either. But this was Sartre's philosophy, and he retreated, as the people in Romans 1 did, and as we see so many in our world do, retreated into suppression of the truth, into denial, and into, ultimately, atheism. And as I said, Sartre is not alone. Many people find themselves in similar situations, their lives having sins within them that they have tried to force into the darkest corners of their soul, only then to realize that there is no place to hide them from where God cannot see. And if allowed to fester, this can drive someone away from God if they know not of His grace and forgiveness. And as I said, this is where so many, including Sartre, fall into the abyss of atheism. They just can't tolerate someone knowing them fully. They know that if the world knew them as they are, they would do nothing but be shameful of themselves. And because God does know them, the very thought of Him is to them the most reprehensible thing in the world. So it has become the solution for so many to banish God from existence. Only then can I have the peace of my secrets.